My name is Sarah. I'm 33 years old, currently living and working in Chicago as a financial manager for an investment firm. I'm not the kind of person who makes a big fuss, nor do I expect anything extravagant, but at the very least, on my own birthday, I thought I deserved respect. That party was held at my parents' house. All the relatives gathered, laughter filling the air, a cake placed right in the middle of the table. And I, the birthday girl, stepped into the garage to start up the classic Mustang I had spent nearly 7 years of relentless work to buy. But when the garage door opened, all I saw was an empty, cold space. The car was gone. I hadn't even had a chance to ask anyone before. Over the sound of clinking glasses and party poppers, my mother raised her glass and my father smiled. We sold Sarah's car to help Nathan start his restaurant. This is her sacrifice for the family. Everyone applauded, as if I had just donated some old piece of junk, not given up the dream I had worked my whole life for. Have you ever had your own family treat your dream as if it were disposable? Have you ever stood silently in the middle of a crowd and realized no one was truly on your side? If you've ever gone through something like that, leave a comment below. Hit like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next part of this story, the story of how I took back what was mine. Every dollar, every dream, every ounce of respect I had stolen from me. I stood frozen in the noisy living room, where the laughter of relatives suddenly turned into a piercing sound, like metal clashing against glass. My father sat there, his right hand holding a wineglass, his left resting proudly on Nathan's shoulder, as if granting him recognition. My mother beamed, her eyes sweeping past me as though nothing was wrong. And I, the owner of the car that had disappeared from the garage, became an outsider in my own birthday celebration. Sold the car? I asked, my voice hoarse, eyes fixed on the face that once felt like my safest place. What do you mean? Sarah, my mother walked closer, her voice still gentle like it always was whenever she needed me to give in. You have a stable job, a good income. Your brother has nothing in his hands yet. This is his one chance to start. I turned to Nathan. He was smiling, without the slightest trace of guilt. Thanks, sis. Really. I'll pay you back soon. I know the Mustang means a lot to you, but I never gave anyone permission to take it. I cut him off, my heart pounding. That car is in my name. You used the spare key and tampered with property that doesn't belong to you. Don't be so tense, my father jumped in, his tone half chastising, half advising. We're family. Not everything has to be spelled out on paper. I looked around. Not a single person stood up for me. The relatives went on laughing, raising glasses, snapping photos. My birthday party had turned into Nathan's business launch, while I was stripped bare, made to pay the price for his so-called fresh start. I took a deep breath, the chill creeping down my spine. If in 30 days that Mustang isn't back, I will sue. For asset misappropriation, for forging ownership, for disrespect. I enunciated every word, clearly not loudly, but no one was laughing after that. My mother's eyes froze. My father set his glass down, the sound of glass on wood echoing heavy in the air. Nathan shrugged, smirking awkwardly. You wouldn't actually do that, would you? Over just a car. It's not just a car, I cut in, clutching the napkin still in my hand. It's 7 years of me working nonstop. It's vacations I turned down, nights in the office, until 2 a.m., the life I put on hold just to have something that was mine. Come on, Sarah. My mother grabbed my hand. You're overreacting. Family means sacrifice for each other. Not everyone has to sacrifice. I pulled my hand away, feeling the invisible wall that had trapped me for years begin to crack. I'm the only one who's been asked to do it again and again, while Nathan just has to open his mouth and everything is handed to him. I turned away, not wanting them to see my eyes welling. Inside, my anger hardened into something else, cold, sharp, and painfully clear. When I walked out of that house, no one called after me. No one followed. The night wind blew through the emptiness in the garage, echoing the absence of the car I once called my dream. I stepped into that void, stood still for a long time. My hand brushed against the cold wall where I used to hang the car keys every time I visited. I pulled out my phone. First, I called the insurance office to confirm the car's ownership had been transferred. Next, I dialed an old friend from my MBA program in New York, now working as an independent attorney. I needed advice on how to handle unauthorized appropriation of personal property within a family. His voice dropped when I finished explaining, "Sarah, this is serious, not just a family dispute. They may have broken the law." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I opened the folder of photos documenting the journey of restoring my Mustang. Every picture of me signing the purchase contract, repainting the body into that deep metallic blue. The custom license plate engraved with my grandfather's initials, the man who taught me how a V8 engine worked in the backyard garage. I remembered his words, "Sarah, women have every right to drive any car they want. What matters is having the courage to keep what you love, even if the world tells you it's not worth it." I got up, grabbed my notebook, and wrote down what I needed to do the next day. Find information about Nathan's rental property for his restaurant. Check the car's registration papers. Did my parents forge my signature or use my personal details? Go to the local government office to request a copy of the asset transfer records. I needed to prove this wasn't just a family matter. I had to make it a legal case, something clear and undeniable. No more empty apologies, no more sacrifices for love. I was not an unconditional bank for anyone, even those sharing my blood. And I was no longer the girl who walked away from her dream without fighting to take it back. The next morning, I left the house in a beige trench coat, a dark scarf wrapped around my neck, each step hitting the cold stone sidewalk in a spring wind that still bit with winter's chill. Chicago hadn't yet warmed, and neither had I. Every line of last night's plan came alive in my head, step by step, without hesitation. My first stop was the bank. The branch sat on the corner near my parents' house, the same place I'd opened my first savings account back in high school. I walked into the lobby, kept my composure, nodded at the receptionist, and went straight to the personal services desk. "Good morning. I need to check information regarding a car registered in my name that was recently used as collateral. I suspect there's been fraud in the paperwork." The woman behind the desk smiled professionally, though uneasily when I mentioned unauthorized sale of property. She asked for my ID, then politely invited me to wait in a small lounge with polished wooden tables and stiff cushioned chairs. About 10 minutes later, a man in his 40s wearing a light gray suit walked in. He introduced himself as the regional financial manager. In his hands was a thin file with my name clipped on top. "Miss Martin, according to these records, the classic Mustang was transferred to a third party through a secured loan agreement signed about 2 weeks ago." I leaned forward, voice steady. "I never signed any document related to transferring or mortgaging that car. Could you show me the contract?" He opened the file and pulled out a photocopy. I glanced at the first page. Under the signature line was my full name, in dark blue ink. My chest tightened as I stared at it. It looked nearly authentic, but the final stroke, the small hook at the end of the H, was always unique to me. Here, it was stretched unnaturally long. "I did not sign this," I said firmly, locking eyes with him. "This is a forgery." He blinked, resting his hand on the desk. "If you have evidence, we can initiate verification and request surveillance footage from the day of the transaction. I want that done immediately, and I'll be notifying my attorney as well." Leaving the bank, I hailed a cab to the address listed in the file. Hamilton Assets, a brokerage firm handling special asset transactions where my Mustang was currently being held, awaiting resale or further collateralization. Their office was in an old building on North Clark Street, third floor overlooking a misty Lake Michigan. The receptionist, a young woman with her hair tied neatly back, welcomed me politely and promised to fetch the person directly responsible for the transaction. Within 5 minutes, the door opened, and the person who walked in made me freeze. Sarah? I stood, stunned. Jared? He was my father's close friend, someone I remembered from nearly every family gathering growing up. 10 years ago, he had moved into real estate and asset investments, occasionally calling to congratulate me whenever I hit a milestone in my career. "What are you doing here?" he asked, though his voice carried tension. I set my bag down on the table. "My Mustang is listed among your firm's held assets, and I just discovered my signature was forged." He was silent for a moment, then exhaled heavily. "I know that car is yours, but your father said my father had no right to sign on my behalf." I cut in sharply. Jared pulled out his phone, tapped quickly, then laid it on the table. The screen showed surveillance footage from the day of the transaction. I leaned closer. My mother walked in first, carrying a folder. Behind her was Nathan, wearing a gray sweater. The camera angle wasn't perfect, but at second 41, I clearly saw Nathan's hand signing the page. "I suspected from the start," Jared said quietly. "But your father insisted it was a verbal family authorization. They told me you were abroad on business and had agreed." I closed my eyes, inhaled deeply. This wasn't a rash mistake. This was a premeditated scheme, fully participated in by my parents and Nathan. When I opened my eyes, I looked straight at Jared. "I need copies of every transaction document and the surveillance footage. My lawyer will be in touch." He nodded, not resisting. "I'll have them sent this afternoon." I stood, pulling on my coat. "Thank you for cooperating, Jared, but from now on, don't call me kid anymore." Walking out of the building, the wind from the lake slapped against my face. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I knew clearly I was stepping into a battle no one in my family ever prepared me for. But I was ready. I no longer cared what they thought of me. The only thing that mattered now was the truth and taking back everything by the law. I didn't drive straight home. Instead, I stopped at a small cafe on the corner of Hyde Park, the same place where I used to cram for exams during my MBA years. The cafe hadn't changed. The scent of old wood blended with the strong aroma of espresso, soft jazz trickled in the quiet air. I chose a table by the window, ordered a hot black coffee, and opened my laptop. In front of me were all the scanned documents Jared had just emailed. The mortgage contract, appraisal reports, confirmation of temporary asset transfer. Every page carried my name, the forged signature, and details I could never mistake: my home address, Idaho number, financial identification codes. Information only someone in my family could have provided. I stared at the screen until the lines blurred. Not from exhaustion, but because a knot of grief was tightening around my throat. Memories surged back like someone was rewinding a film I'd kept hidden for years. On my 10th birthday, the whole family was busy taking Nathan to a city swim competition. My mom told me to understand because he's still young and needs encouragement. My birthday was just a single slice of leftover cake sitting on the table, no candles, no gifts. But when Nathan turned 12, he got an expensive mountain bike and a father-son trip to a national park. At 15, I won a full scholarship to a prestigious high school. The awards ceremony was held on the same day Nathan sprained his ankle in a basketball game. My mom apologized for not making it, saying, "Your brother needs someone to take care of him." I quietly brought the certificate home and taped it to my bedroom wall. No one asked about it. No one took a single picture. Then came my college graduation, a day I had waited 4 years for. I prepared invitations, sent them out 3 weeks in advance. But that morning my mom called. The flight got canceled, we can't make it. I stood among the sea of caps and gowns, parents smiling, holding flowers, cameras flashing, capturing every moment. I stood there with the cap on my head, diploma in one hand, the phone silent in the other. No one came. The very next day, Nathan's high school graduation party lit up our backyard with strings of lights, a full barbecue, a hired videographer, and even a live band. Everyone praised Nathan for being smart, well-mannered, a natural leader. And me, the quiet daughter who tucked her achievements into silence, received only a few awkward congratulations and a half-hearted hug. I used to think maybe it was because I didn't demand much, that I didn't show my feelings, so they assumed I didn't need anything. I used to think that if I just worked hard enough, they would finally see me. I used to think if I achieved something big enough, they would realize I was never less. But then the Mustang disappeared, and they applauded, and they called it a necessary sacrifice. It wasn't the car they took away, it was everything I had ever believed about fairness, about family, about effort being recognized. My coffee had long since gone cold. I sat there, watching the people passing outside the window, their coats fluttering in the wind, smiles carefree on their faces. And I was left piecing together the shards of years of being ignored, pushed aside from every priority. My phone buzzed, a message from my mom. "Can you come home for dinner? I made your favorite stew. Nathan wants to apologize too." I set the phone back down gently, as if pressing harder might make it burst into flames. Apologize? Do I need an apology when what I needed recognition was denied to me since the second grade? When I tutored for 3 years just to afford my college application fees, while they poured the entire savings fund into Nathan's private school? When I moved out, no one called to ask how I was living, what I was eating until the day I appeared on television, receiving an award at a finance conference, and my mom texted, "My friend said she saw you on television. You looked pretty good." It wasn't until I had my own car that they remembered my worth, and then they took it, as if to prove once again I was never truly allowed to have something that was mine. I reopened the case files and created a separate folder named Mustang Justice. Every email, every scanned document, every piece of video evidence I saved and labeled by date. I knew exactly what I needed to do next. I wasn't just reclaiming a car, I was forcing them to see me clearer than ever before, and no one could look away. That afternoon, I called Nathan and demanded a meeting. There was no reason to stall. I wasn't about to sit at another family dinner table pretending to play the role of harmony. Tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock, Cornerstone Cafe on 5th Street. Can you make it? Silence lingered on the other end for a few seconds. Why so intense? Let's just meet at home, save the trouble. At the cafe, I said firmly, you don't need to bring a birthday cake. Just bring your business plan. Business plan? You said you'd repay me for the car. Then show me what you're doing with the money. Projected revenue, operating costs, target customers, suppliers, legal documents. You call it an investment. I want to see proof that it's real. I hung up before he could slip into his usual excuses. At 7:15 the next night, Nathan showed up. He wore a wrinkled brown jacket, muddy shoes, hair tousled like he'd just rolled out of bed. His eyes darted, but he still smiled. Sorry, traffic was bad. You really called me out just to talk about the restaurant? Sit down. I pushed the menu aside, my eyes fixed on his hands. Did you bring anything? He tossed a thin file onto the table. I opened it, flipping through. No cost breakdown, no lease contract. Just a few glossy design prints, a list of Italian dishes with fancy names and sloppy handwritten notes. This is your business plan? You just don't get it. Nathan leaned back in his chair. Things are more flexible now, not rigid like when you were in school. It's the era of creativity. Creativity doesn't replace systems. How do you plan to run a restaurant without knowing how many plates you need to sell daily to break even? He squinted. You're treating me like a student doing homework? No, I said slowly, my voice low. I'm treating you like someone who owes me $45,000. And you haven't shown me a single cent that's likely to come back. The space between us grew heavy. Soft music floated from the cafe speakers. Cups clinked in the kamar background. Nathan looked away, running a hand through his hair. You act like I begged you for this. The whole family agreed. Mom and Dad signed, told me you'd understand. That car was in my name. No one had the right to sign without me. You said you'd pay me back. Prove it. He smirked faintly, pulling out his phone. You think I'm not doing anything? Look. He swiped through a few pictures, a hastily printed sign, the facade of a half-renovated building, a couple of stainless steel gas stoves. See? I'm building, step by step. Not everyone has everything ready-made. I'm trying. I tilted my head, locking eyes with him. Trying with other people's money isn't effort, it's dependency. Nathan tightened his grip on the coffee cup, silent. I lowered my voice, but not my stance. You had your own car, bought by Mom and Dad. They paid your art school tuition, covered 3 months in Italy. You had an apartment until you sold it off because you ran out of cash. And now you've taken the one thing I earned for myself, the car I bought with my own work, to prop up a dream that doesn't exist yet. You think I don't deserve a chance? I think you're not serious. His face slackened, not from calm but resignation, as if finally cornered by the truth he'd been dodging. I thought once I got the restaurant, everyone would be proud. I wanted to be like you, to be recognized. But I don't know where to start. Everything comes so easily for you. Not easy. I cut in. I worked from 16, juggled 3 shifts, slept 3 hours a night, got rejected 92 times before I landed at my current firm. You don't see it because you've never had to do anything on your own. Nathan's hand loosened on the cup, his voice dropped. What are you going to do? Actually sue? That depends on you. I've already spoken to my lawyer. But I still want to give you a chance. Show me a real plan. A real path. Not some pictures and fancy menu names. If you want a loan, then act like a borrower. I am not your anonymous sponsor. He said nothing, just nodded slowly. I stood, handed back the thin file. Start by rewriting this. And when you're ready to talk like an adult, call me. I walked out, leaving behind the faint jingle of the cafe doorbell and the warm scent of coffee. The night wind cut across my collar, sharp and cool, but my chest wasn't cold. I wasn't angry. I was clearer than ever. The next morning after meeting Nathan, I sat alone at my desk. My laptop was open, but no emails were typed. My mind replayed the moment Nathan admitted he didn't know where to begin. That feeling, not pity, but disappointment, lingered. I had hoped, even just a little, that he was serious. But those painted menus, those shabby storefront pictures, they were nothing but a thin coat of gloss over the emptiness beneath. I sat motionless for nearly half an hour, until my phone buzzed. It was Cameron, an old high school friend, once close to Nathan. We hadn't spoken since his wedding years ago. I answered. Sarah? It's me, Cameron Foster. I heard about the car from some of the old group. I also heard you're digging into Nathan's restaurant project? I tightened my grip on the phone. Yes. Why? His voice hesitated, then shifted lower. I don't want to interfere in family matters. But you should know, Nathan didn't put all that money into the restaurant. A big chunk went into poker tables at a spot near Aurora. There's video of it. And I also heard from a few people he used part of that investment to pay off old debts. For a few seconds, I didn't answer. My mind felt like someone had tapped an old blind spot that had been there for years. I stood up and stepped out onto the balcony. Chicago was cold and windy that morning, but I felt nothing. Are you sure? I am, and I can send you the video. A friend of mine works security. There he saved the footage when he saw Nathan walk in with his old gambling crowd. I don't want to see you get fooled like everyone else. I thanked him, keeping my tone calm, though inside me was a wave of anger and emptiness crashing together. Cameron sent the video less than 10 minutes later. I opened it. The footage wasn't crystal clear, but I recognized Nathan instantly messy curls, a dark brown leather jacket, that sneaky stride. He sat at a poker table, counting chips, throwing his arms up with a kind of manic excitement I had never seen in him. I watched nearly 40 minutes of the clip. There was no sound, but expressions needed no words. Nathan won a big hand, jumped to his feet cheering, then kept playing. Less than 10 minutes later, he lost everything. He left the table empty-handed, and I saw it clearly, pieces of hope thrown under the silver light, along with the dream I had spent 7 years building. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just opened a new document, typing a detailed report for my lawyer, time, location, evidence, financial tracking to follow. I wouldn't confront them yet. I wasn't someone who acted while still burning hot. I wanted the whole picture clear, wanted everyone to see what I had seen for years: affection exploited under the mask of family. The next day, I dropped by my parents' house. No warning, no chance for them to prepare excuses. The house looked the same. The smell of waffles drifted from the kitchen, the radio played a morning show, and my mother was arranging flowers in the living room. She looked up, startled. "Sarah? Why didn't you text first?" I wanted to ask a few things. "Where's Dad?" "In the backyard, watering." I nodded. "Then sit down, Mom. I need to make something clear." She hesitated, then rinsed her hands, untied her apron, and sat down. I opened my laptop, paused the video at the frame where Nathan's face turned toward the camera, his mouth curved in victory after a big win. "What were you doing that night?" She frowned. "What is this about?" "The Mustang I worked 7 years for you," said. It went to Nathan as capital for the restaurant. "But this is where the money went." I turned the screen toward her. She stared at the image, silent. "You still think I'm overreacting?" She leaned back slightly, her hand pressed to her chest. I didn't know about this." I looked straight at her. "You signed the transfer. If Nathan misused the money, you share responsibility." The back door opened. My father stepped in, watering can still in hand, cheerful until he saw our faces. "What's going on?" I turned, my hand still on the laptop. "Did anyone in this family bother to check what Nathan actually did with the money? Or did you all just assume he'd do the right thing?" My father glanced at the screen, eyes narrowing. "What is that?" "The night Nathan got the money from selling my car, he didn't go near the restaurant. He went to a casino. And he used that money to pay gambling debts. Someone caught it on camera." The room went heavy. My mother lowered her head, silent. My father stood frozen in the beam of morning light through the window, the watering can dripping onto the floor. I didn't need to say more. They saw it. I shut the laptop and stood. "I don't need an apology. I need accountability. And I'll wait until we address this in front of everyone." Then I walked out. I didn't look back. In my bag was a USB with a copy of the footage, next to my lawyer's retainer contract. And I knew when the time came, I would lay it on the table. In front of the entire family. No more hiding. No more excuses. On Nathan's restaurant opening day, Chicago's sky was gray, like it was ready to collapse. I hadn't planned on going, but at 10 a.m. I got a text from my mom. "If you have time, today is important for Nathan. We should all support. I stared at the message without replying, not because I was cold, but because I saw it clearly. They didn't want truth. They wanted to preserve the illusion that the family was united, that Nathan was still the promising son who just needed one more chance. By noon, I got a call from a food supplier, someone I knew from an import company I once worked with. Sarah, sorry to bother you, but is your brother opening a restaurant called Bella Vita downtown? We delivered an order last week, but haven't been paid. Everything's in his name, but he won't answer his phone. I stepped onto the balcony, watching the traffic below. My voice was slow, steady. You should be ready to recall your goods. He may not be able to pay. The man sighed. I was afraid of that. I didn't ask more. At this point, everyone had to face their own consequences. Around 4 p.m., I got a text from a former employee at the commercial building where Bella Vita was leasing space. Sarah, you should come. Something big is happening. By the time I arrived, a crowd had gathered outside. Guests waiting for tables stood around, calling on their phones, confused. Near the entrance, 2 tattooed men in dark leather jackets were shouting at Nathan. You said last week you'd pay today, one of them barked, his gravelly voice carrying over the crowd. We've been patient. Now you're saying you don't have it, Nathan stammered, sweat running down his temples, his shirt clinging to him. Just a few more days. Once customers come in, I'll have revenue I'll transfer right away. No more days, the man snapped. Either the money or you know what comes next. I pushed through the crowd. My eyes caught my mother. She was standing frozen not far away, pale, clutching her purse like it might keep her whole world from collapsing. Sarah, you're here. Her voice was barely a whisper. Things are getting out of control. I didn't answer. My gaze locked on Nathan, head bowed, about to collapse. You should call the police, I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. This is intimidation, and it's the direct result of your financial recklessness. Nathan whipped his head toward me, face flushed. You're still lecturing? If you'd given me money from the start, it wouldn't have come to this. The words cracked through the air like a slap. I heard whispers ripple through the crowd, saw eyes turn to me and my mother's gaze, stunned and afraid. I took a step forward, my voice calm as still water. I don't owe you anything. I am not a bank. I am not this family's emergency bailout fund. I made that clear from the start. Don't say that in front of outsiders, my mother pleaded, her voice trembling. People will think we're divided. I turned to her. For the first time, I didn't look at her with expectation, but as one adult to another. You should have thought of division when you signed away my car without telling me, when you trusted Nathan's word without checking. Sarah, I thought, you were strong. You could handle it. Nathan, he needed help. I nodded slightly. And that's why everything is collapsing now, because in this family, strength means being forced to sacrifice, and mistakes are always called second chances. A police car pulled up. Someone had called. I didn't care who. Nathan backed away, panicked. The 2 men retreated to the curb, not wanting to tangle with official trouble. An officer asked who was responsible for the restaurant. Nathan muttered his name. I stood by, silent. This wasn't my stage. I walked away as the officer began asking for business permits, tax registrations, and proof of capital. The tension behind me was tight as a string pulled too far. I felt no satisfaction, only emptiness. Because all of this never needed to happen if someone had told Nathan no sooner. If my parents, I had stopped to question instead of dumping every hope on the son they never forced to take responsibility. I passed my mother. She stood rooted to the ground. I didn't look at her. I only said quietly, you once told me family means no one gets left behind. But today, you led Nathan to the edge. Not me. Then I walked straight to my car, leaving behind the noise, the confused faces of staff, the guests turning away, and the stunned stares of people too used to living in denial. That night, my mother called. "Dinner tomorrow, 6 o'clock. Your father wants to talk. It's time we sit down." Her voice was tired, stripped of the usual coaxing or avoidance. It was the hollow tone of someone who had seen the wall crack and didn't know how to mend it. I didn't ask questions, I just hung up, then stepped into my office. On the desk sat the black leather case I had locked earlier. I opened it, placing each piece of evidence into order. The forged transfer contract for the Mustang, the casino statements, screenshots of the security footage from the night Nathan gambled, the recording of our cafe conversation where he admitted using the money wrong but planned to fix it once the restaurant opened. I didn't go to that dinner to argue. I went to end all the pretending. The Chicago sky the next afternoon was gray, like an old omen. My parents' house looked the same: neat exterior, trimmed lawn, a white painted fence, like something from an illustration. But I'd long since learned that the paint outside didn't reflect what was inside. The door opened before I could even ring the bell. My mother stood there, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back hastily. No usual smile. "Robert's here too," she said softly. "We need someone neutral." I nodded. I remembered clearly when I got my MBA scholarship. The only congratulatory email I received was from Uncle Robert. My father had been busy taking Nathan to register for a summer photography class. My father sat at the head of the table, eyes dodging mine as I walked in. Nathan was already there, in a wrinkled shirt, pale-faced. My mother hovered close to him, like trying to reassure him. Robert sat to my left, back straight, gaze steady and calm. I pulled out a chair, opened my case, and said nothing. Each set of documents went onto the table, one by one, without hurry. I placed a recorder down and pressed play. No one spoke. The room filled with the voice from the small speaker. Nathan's voice, hesitant at first, then clear, admitting he'd misused the money, saying he had to take risks because otherwise no one would ever believe I was serious. When the recording stopped, I opened the transfer contract for the Mustang and pointed at the signature. "That isn't mine. The signature was forged. I have comparative documents from the bank and insurance company. This is illegal." My mother gripped the tablecloth. "You're planning to sue your own brother?" "I'm planning to demand respect, and if that requires the law, then the law it will be." I slid over the last set of documents, the casino statement and video excerpt. I didn't need to play it again. The dates, the figures, the address spoke for themselves. My father exhaled heavily, lowering his head. He's young, who hasn't made mistakes? But mistakes have consequences. I met his eyes. And covering them up again and again is why he never grows up. "And what about you?" Nathan looked up, voice sharper than usual. "You think you're perfect? You've never asked for help? You act like you've never made mistakes?" My mistake was believing. Believing my parents. Believing that if I stayed quiet, worked hard, someday I'd be treated fairly. But all I got was being used as an endless source of money without a single thank you. My mother closed her eyes. Her hands clenched, her lips trembling. I couldn't tell if she was angry, scared, or realizing something she had avoided for years. Then Robert laid his hand on the table. "Enough." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. "I've sat through years of dinners where no one asked what I thought. I've watched from the outside as Sarah worked, stayed silent, and was overlooked time and again. While Nathan was shielded, praised, handed family resources as if they were his birthright." He turned to my father. "Gerald, you once looked down on me for not having outstanding achievements. But I've never borrowed without paying back. Never signed in someone else's name. Never forged documents to cover failure. Let me be clear. If this family keeps covering up wrongdoing, I will stand with Sarah and take this to court. The air in the room turned to lead. My mother broke into real sobs, not the manipulative kind she often used to ease tension, but loud, shaking sobs. I I didn't know it would go this far. Because you never stopped to look, I answered quietly. Whenever someone said she'll be fine, she can handle it, you believed it. And then you let people walk over me like I wasn't even there. My father stood, his hand turned a few pages of the documents. He said nothing, only gave a small nod, then turned away. Nathan looked around, then dropped his head. His voice cracked through the heavy silence. I didn't think it would get this bad. I thought I could fix it. I just wanted someone to believe in me once before I had anything to show. Belief isn't handing over money and walking away, I replied. Belief is giving responsibility and letting someone prove they deserve it. I stood, gathering the files. No one stopped me. I haven't decided whether I'll sue, but I won't carry this anymore. I snapped the case shut, my eyes moving across each face, my father, my mother, Nathan, and Robert. All were silent, and this time not out of fear of speaking, but because there was nothing left to say. I walked out of the dining room, back straight. The door closed behind me, soft but final. For the first time in years, I didn't have to wonder who was on my side. The truth was clear, and no one could ignore it anymore. I stood still for a few minutes after the wooden door shut, gripping the handle of my case like letting go might bring everything crashing down. My mother's sobs carried through. Each sound cut into the memory I once guarded of a mother I thought would always side with fairness. I stepped into the yard, the cold wind slapping my face. April air carried dampness from the lake, weighing heavy on me. I didn't know if I had just won something or simply witnessed the collapse that had been crumbling for years finally burst open. I opened my car door, had barely sat, when screeching brakes sounded at the driveway. A beat-up black SUV, license plate paint peeling, stopped at the curb. The door swung open. Two men stepped out, dressed like the ones I'd seen outside Nathan's restaurant. They didn't rush. They walked up the steps slowly, carrying that dense silence I'd seen before in corporate debt negotiations. I opened my car door and stepped out, but before I could speak, one of them nodded at me with a familiar look. "You Sarah Martin?" I nodded slowly. "Thanks for not leaving. We need to confirm who's inside the house." I didn't need to ask their purpose. Nathan had reached the limit, and that limit had nothing to do with family ties. I didn't answer, only stepped aside. They knocked on the door, firm, unapologetic. Inside, hurried footsteps echoed, then the door opened. My mother appeared, eyes swollen and wet. "Sorry, we need to see Nathan Martin. Is he here?" She couldn't answer. My father came up behind her, confusion in his eyes as he saw them. "What's this about?" The taller man pulled a brown envelope from his coat, sealed with stamps and a debt. Collection company's logo. "Mr. Martin has an unpaid loan. It's 42 days overdue. He hasn't answered calls or emails." "Loan? What loan?" My mother's voice broke. "A personal loan under Nathan Martin's name, collateralized with undefined assets. Originally $20,000, now with interest and late fees, it's $24,800. Without a payment plan, we'll move to asset posting under recovery terms." I stood less than 30 feet away, watching it all like a silent play where every actor had forgotten their lines. Nathan didn't come out, no explanation, no response. "Is he inside?" one man asked again. My mother said nothing, clutching her blouse, eyes darting. "I'll call him," my father said, stepping in. Minutes later he returned, shaking his head. He locked his room. "Won't open." One man jotted notes in a ledger. "We'll be back tomorrow. If there's no responsible party by then, we'll seek a court order." They left as they came, quiet, steady, without breaking a thing, but leaving a deeper crack in an already rotted air. I didn't step back inside. I only looked at my parents, both standing, frozen on the porch, my father gripping the wooden post for balance, my mother trying to hide her empty gaze. From now on, I said evenly, Nathan's problem should be his to solve. My mother's voice shook. He's panicking. If you walk away, who will hold him together? I wasn't walking away out of spite. I was stepping back because I couldn't be the wall forever for someone who refused to stand on his own. I used to think, I looked at her, then at my father, that if I worked hard enough, I'd be seen. But in this house, staying quiet only made me invisible. Sarah, my father said softly, but had nothing else to add. I gave a small nod, a farewell to an evening that should have been about repair. But I had learned, you can't patch something built on cracked ground. You have to let it collapse before rebuilding. I walked back to my car and drove off into the night without looking back. I wasn't angry anymore. I was tired. And in that fatigue was a strange peace, not from avoidance, but from laying down a burden that was never mine to carry. The next morning, I spent hours at my lawyer's office, finalizing the paperwork to move forward with legal action. No more tangled emotions. Now it was work, documents, clear processes. I sat across from Elise, my private attorney, a woman with more than 10 years in family asset protection. She spoke carefully, sharply, the kind of person you trusted when signing your name. We have all the evidence, Elise said, reviewing the file and checking off items. A forged signature, unauthorized transfer of property, and misuse of funds. Sarah, you have every right to pursue the entire case. I nodded, silent. But before we proceed, she continued, pulling another file from her drawer. I got a call from a Robert Martin. He said he needs to meet you privately. It concerns an asset under your name, a trust fund from your late grandfather. I froze. What? He didn't say more, only asked me to relay the message and set a meeting. I think you should hear him out. That afternoon, I sat across from Robert in a small diner in the old neighborhood, the place where we used to share toast and lemonade when I was in middle school. He wore a gray sweater, carrying a faded canvas bag. He hadn't changed much, still calm, reserved, as if always holding on to something unspoken. He placed the bag on the table, opened it, and pulled out a thick file, carefully clipped and sealed in plastic. Do you remember, he asked, that your grandfather used to work in real estate? I nodded. He used to have 3 apartments on the lakefront and some land on the west side. After he passed, my dad said everything was divided equally. Robert's eyes softened. Not everything was divided. There was one part he held back, and he told no one outside his brothers, because he wanted it saved for the right time. I stayed silent. Sarah, he said slowly, when you were in 8th grade, there was a day you sat in his car while your parents argued because Nathan had broken a window. You didn't say anything. You didn't cry. You just sat in silence. Afterwards, he took you for ice cream, without a word. But in his mind, he understood. He slid the folder toward me. He created a small trust in your name, not public, not listed in the estate division. He named only one person as trustee, me. I touched the folder's cover, the sensation like a faint electric shock on my skin. You were always the one who didn't demand, who didn't make noise, but he saw you, and he left you something that would be only yours. I opened the folder. Inside was the statement of a special account, an investment portfolio of stocks, bonds, and real estate. Current value, nearly $620,000. This figure, it's the result of 15 years of accumulation, reinvested steadily. Every financial decision carried my signature, but there was no right of withdrawal except for you. I looked up. Why didn't he say anything? Because he wanted you to choose the moment, not him deciding when you needed it. but when you stood up for yourself. And now, this is that moment. I sat motionless, unable to speak. Robert continued softly, and it isn't only about money. He placed a small key on the table, the Mustang. He helped when you bought it. After you told him you were close to saving enough, he called me in order to transfer from the trust. But he still had the title in your name so you could keep your pride. You never knew. And he wanted it that way. I gripped the key tightly, eyes locked on it. That car wasn't just transportation. It was his way of saying, "You are worthy." I turned my face away, not wanting him to see my eyes wet. "What now?" I asked softly. "Can I use the money?" "Yes, you are the official beneficiary. All the paperwork is ready. If you want to use it to reclaim the car, reclaim your dignity, or simply begin a new chapter, then do it. But don't use it to rescue people unwilling to change." I looked down at the papers. On every page was something my grandfather had left me, not just wealth, a choice, a quiet but unshakable trust. I sat in my car for hours afterward, pulled out my notebook, and wrote a new list. No longer one of lawsuits or accusations, but a plan for the fund, part for legal asset protection, part to safeguard what remained of the Mustang if things escalated further, and the rest to rebuild. But this time, not to be recognized by anyone, but so I'd never again need permission to own my life. I sat in my lawyer's office on a drizzly afternoon, yellow light from the desk lamp pooling on the oak table, creating a space warm but serious. Elise sat beside me, steady, silent, my companion through the past weeks. Before us lay the final documents, printed in triplicate with detailed appendices, civil repayment commitments, no further violations of personal property, and a monitored repayment schedule. I had thought carefully, not out of softness, but because I understood litigation would leave wounds I didn't need, especially when what I sought wasn't victory, but boundaries. Recognition of fairness. "I want them to sign voluntarily, without pressure," I told Elise, eyes fixed on the bold title line of the first page. "We won't threaten or corner them. We'll give them a clear choice." Elise nodded, her voice low. "I'll stand behind you. But you'll lead." That family dinner had no tears, no bread or flowers in the center like before. Just 6 chairs around the old wooden table, white light overhead making it feel more like a boardroom than a kitchen. I placed 3 folders on the table, handing one to my father, one to my mother, one to Nathan. No long speeches, no accusations. Only what needed to be said. "These are the 2 options. 1, we take this to court. Unauthorized transfer, forged signatures, and misuse of personal property can be prosecuted. I have full evidence and witnesses." I paused, meeting each of their eyes. 2, you sign this agreement. Each of you accepts responsibility for your part. Nathan will repay the full amount misused through legal work, under supervised financial planning. And you, Mom and Dad, will not intervene, won't bail him out, won't hide consequences under the family name again. My father turned a few pages, hands trembling. My mother stared at the papers, lips pressed tight. Nathan leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the table. No one protested, but no one spoke either. I slid the pen toward them. "You don't have to sign tonight. But if I don't hear back within 72 hours, I'll file with the civil court." Silence stretched. Then my father took the pen. He signed first, slowly, sighing as he set it down. My mother followed, her hand icy as she handed me her copy. Finally, Nathan. He looked at me for a long moment, eyes no longer evasive. Only exhaustion from someone who'd hit bottom. "I'll find work, any work, and I'll pay. No one will do it for me." I said nothing, only folded the papers and slipped them back into my bag. We didn't speak further, but I knew our roles had shifted. 2 weeks later, I got the Mustang back. Hamilton Assets sent notice that the car had been fully serviced before release. At the garage, the manager pointed to the far corner light shining down on the gleaming black metallic paint. I walked over, laid my hand on the hood. Cool metal, solid body. The key Robert had given me was snug in my coat pocket. I slipped it into the ignition, turned. The dashboard lit up. The engine growled low and warm, like a familiar whisper. I drove out, heading straight for the highway into the mountains. Colorado's mountain roads in early summer were still veiled in mist. I rolled the windows down, letting wind rush through my hair, carrying the scent of pine, fresh asphalt, and memories fading behind me. Every curve, every push on the gas, I felt the difference. No one in the back seat for me to carry. No phone buzzing with rescue requests. No pleading eyes to soften my resolve. Only me. And the car I had reclaimed. I stopped at a pull-off by the cliff, where the valley stretched below. The sky was so blue it felt touchable. The silence so deep I could hear the trees shifting. I stepped out, leaning against the car. My grandfather's voice echoed in my mind, deep, steady. A dream doesn't just need money to keep, it needs strength to protect. I smiled faintly, lighter than ever. I hadn't just kept my dream, I'd rebuilt the foundation that had once been denied. From that day, invitations came for me to speak at conferences on personal asset rights, family boundaries, and the strength of protecting one's values. Not because I was a legal expert, but because I had once been the only one in that house willing to stand up when no one else did. I shared my story each time with truth, with pain, with resolve. And at the end of every event, someone always approached me, eyes wet, squeezing my hand and saying, "Thank you, I thought I was the only one." I squeezed back, smiling. Because I understood a dream, when held firmly in your own hands, will always mean more than anything given. And when you stand up, you may help others learn to stand too. If you've ever been in my place pushed aside, labeled the responsible one just because you stayed quiet, share your story in the comments. Have you ever had your kindness exploited by family? Have you ever had to step out of the family's shadow alone to claim your justice? I'd love to hear from you, because I believe everyone has a limit. And when you learn to defend that line, you're not just protecting yourself, you're inspiring others still silent in the dark. If my story resonates with you, hit subscribe. There are so many more journeys, so many truths hidden behind seemingly perfect families, so many downfalls and unexpected rises, stories I will share in those to come. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next story.